Hey, what's up guys, it's TechSumer talking to you here, and today we are back again talking about the MacBook lineup. Yes, the MacBook lineup is a very interesting thing because I think that right now buying a MacBook is kind of a challenge. You have the M2 MacBook Air, you have the M2 MacBook Pro, you also have the M1 MacBook Air, the M1 Mac Mini. This is all the low-end computers, and then you have the M1 Pro, MacBook Pro 14-inch, the M1 Pro, MacBook Pro 16-inch, the M1 Max MacBook Pro 14-inch, and the M1 Max MacBook Pro 16-inch, aka that computer over there. So this is all of the MacBooks on the lineup, and then of course you also have the iMac 24-inch with the M1, and of course the Mac Studio. This is all the Macs that are available. But today I want to focus more on the MacBook lineup because I do think that right now we have a very confused lineup, and I've seen a lot of people asking me which computer should I choose? Should I choose that one, the M2 Air, the M1 Pro? Like lots of confusions and questions, and so I decided that it was worth it to make a video on it. So I've been using the M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro for the last 10 months or 11 months, and I've used the M2 MacBook Air for 2 weeks. So I think I have a very good inception of which computer should you go for. I also have used the M1 MacBook Pro and the M2 MacBook Pro. I've also tried out. Of course, I mean, I do think I have enough experience to talk about all of those computers. So in today's video, I will compare them all and try to help you choose between all of these different MacBooks. Which one should you choose? Which one should you go? Which one should you pay more? And which one should you save your money? So I do think I have a very good idea, and I will try to help you in this video. So if you are excited for that, do not forget to drop a like down below, subscribe to the channel, help me out reach 1,000 subscribers until the end of the year. That's one of my biggest dreams, and yes, that will be pretty cool. So no further ado, let's get started. As you know, the MacBook lineup is a very intriguing and complex lineup. It starts with the M1 MacBook Air. The M1 MacBook Air is cheap. It starts at $999. And it's a very basic and versatile computer. It's an old design from around 2018, from the Intel days, I should say. And it's a very useful, very practical computer, very small, light, and it features the M1 chip. This chip, it's still very powerful. In my opinion, like the jump from the M2 for the M1 doesn't justify the price that you are paying. So listen correctly. If you don't really care about the newest design of the M2 MacBook Air, then the M1 MacBook Air would be probably the best option for you. The M1 MacBook Air doesn't feature MagSafe, doesn't feature the newest and shiniest designs, but it's still a very powerful and very practical computer to use. For all of you students and all of you teachers and people that just want a very light laptop, this is the perfect computer. You can get it on the student discount, on the educational discount, and it will start at $899. And also, it's a very cheap but very powerful laptop. Do not get me wrong, the M1 chip there, it's powerful enough for 100% of your needs on university, on your work. Like, it's a very powerful and fun and, of course, portable and light computer. It's very useful, and the only downside that I point out for students is the fact that it doesn't have that much I/O. It only features 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, but if you think about it, you will save so much money that you can spend a little bit extra, like $50, on a dongle that gives you USB-A, HDMI, everything, and you will only take 1 port. So I do think that the M1 MacBook Air is a great choice for people that want to save the most amount of money, but still want to buy a MacBook with Apple Silicon in it. So my biggest and most recommended computer on this lineup is the M1 MacBook Air. Always start with that computer. See if you can get served with the M1 chip, and of course, if you can, then decide, should I get the newest design and get the M2 chip as a bonus, or should I just go for the cheapest laptop available and then go for the M1 and spec the M1 a little bit, give it a little bit more storage and give it a little bit more RAM if you really need it. But I do think that the M1 MacBook Air is the best deal and the best value for money on the MacBook lineup. Of course, there are a lot of other MacBooks that are also insane deals, but they are expensive. They are not the cheapest MacBook. One of those being the M1 Max 16-inch. But let's now get to the M2 MacBook Air, because I've used that computer for 2 weeks and I have tons of thoughts. I've made a review, comparisons on that computer. I made tons of videos. And now that I've come back to the line and tried to help you choose between the MacBooks on the lineup, the M2 MacBook Air would be a computer that I would told you to touch it with carefulness, because The M2 Air is an amazing machine. It's amazingly fast, it's amazingly cool. It works so well. It's very easy to use, very playful to use. Like, the design is very light, very easy to grab, very smooth, very appealing to the looks. It's a very beautiful computer. But I would be careful, because the M2 MacBook Air, in terms of performance, the base model, it's worse than the M1 in several aspects. One being the storage and the speed of the SSDs, and the second one being the fact that by Apple Silicon, or by its design, using swap memory, then of course your performance will take a hit when using powerful tasks like Final Cut Pro, Logic Pro, and other things like Photoshop. So consider this. If you are going to spend the least amount of money possible and you just want to buy the base model, then I would recommend you going for the M1 MacBook Air. Because the M2 MacBook Air, it's worse than the M1 MacBook Air. If you do really need the M2 MacBook Air, then I would advise you going for the 512 minimum for the storage, because let's be honest, 256 is not enough for a laptop these days, but 512 bare minimum. And then if you do really need the performance, go for the 16GB of RAM. This will completely future-proof your device for the next 6 to 7, 8 years. So be careful. But one thing that you should also be careful is the fact that if you are going to spend tons of money on the M2 MacBook Air, be careful that you are getting very close to the M1 Pro MacBook Pro, and that computer starts at $1999 and features the M1 Pro chip, features 512GB of storage, 16GB of RAM, and tons of amazing features like mini LED, like ProMotion, and other stuff that just make the computer worth it. Of course, the M1 Pro MacBook Pro is expensive, don't get me wrong, like, it's a very expensive computer. But if you are spending $1,700, $1,800, $1,900 on your M2 MacBook Air because you want more storage, you want more RAM, then save your money there, put it towards the M1 Pro MacBook Pro, spend an extra $100, $75, and then get the same amount of storage, the same amount of RAM, and other features like ProMotion, more ports, mini LED, better speakers, better battery life, everything that you would want out of a computer. Yes, I do think that the M1 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro, the base model, is one of the best, not the best deals on this lineup. It's not the cheapest, nor the most expensive one, not the most powerful one, not the one with the better battery life, no. But I do think that, in general, is the more balanced computer, the best one. In my opinion, if you are a prosumer, if you are a consumer that are looking for a high-grade laptop that is not that much expensive, that's not professionally expensive, but it's powerful, it has the newest features from the Apple Silicon lineup, then the M1 Pro MacBook Pro 16-inch is the option for you. Of course, then there's the option for the M2 MacBook Pro, but I won't even count that computer. We have seen now that the M2 MacBook Air thermally throttles a bit, but the M2 MacBook Pro also thermally throttles, not as much because it has a fan. So if you are only willing to spend $1,300, you don't have any more money than that, and you are thinking, I'll need a little bit more performance than the M2 MacBook Air can deliver for sustained workflows, then that's the only case that I see the M2 MacBook Pro making sense. So take this in mind. From the M2 MacBook Air to the M1 Pro MacBook Pro 14-inch is a very easy and fast jump. So be very, very careful for what you choose, for what you buy, and for what you spend your money. Upwards than the M1 Pro 14-inch, then I would recommend you going for the 16-inch version. Yes, do not buy the M1 Max MacBook Pro 14-inch. You won't need that much performance, and the M1 Max chip thermally throttles heavily on the 14-inch computer. So if you do really need that much performance in general, then just go for the 16-inch MacBook Pro. If you just want a big computer with the most amount of screen possible, then the M1 Pro 16-inch MacBook Pro is a choice for you. It's the best battery life on any Apple Silicon computer. It starts at $24.99, and you get the M1 Pro chip, not non-bin version. You get 16GB of RAM and 512GB of storage. In my opinion, the best deal, or at least one of the best deals on the Apple Silicon lineup, being those, the M1 MacBook Air, the base model, $999 version, the M1 Pro 14-inch, the base model, the $1999 version, and the base model of the 16-inch MacBook Pro. So, if you are listening very carefully, you can see that the best deals are often, and in this case, like 100% of the time, are the base models. Because when you start upgrading more than that, you will start spending way more money than you actually need. So, listen to me. If you do really need that much performance, then I consider you going for the M1 Max. And then if you do really need the M1 Max chip, go for the 16-inch MacBook Pro with the M1 Max, because then you will get the full performance of the M1 Max chip. But if you do really need the M1 Max performance, you don't have the money for the 16-inch, then consider going for the Mac Studio, the base model one, a refurbished model that you can get for $17.99, or at least the base model at Apple that starts at $2,000. If you do really need the M1 Max chip. If you don't really need the M1 Max chip, then spend the money, go for the M1 Pro 16-inch MacBook Pro. You will love this computer. I love this computer so much. It's my favorite computer ever. Even better than the M2 MacBook Air. It's light? No. Is it like thin? No. It's bulky. It's heavy. But it has all the I/O that I need. The HDMI ports, the SSD card slot, which I've used often. It has 4 ports. It has a high impedance headphone jack. It has MagSafe that charges at 140 watts. That's insane. It charges so fast. It has an amazing mini LED display with 120 Hz ProMotion technology, which is just insanely good. It plays HDR content. It's so beautiful. It's so cool to look at, so cool to use. And at the end of the day, it's the best computer that I could buy for my line of work. So listen carefully. The 4 computers I will recommend to you on the MacBook Pro lineup are the M1 MacBook Air, the base model one that starts at $999. That's the best and the cheapest deal, in my opinion. So if you are looking for the MacBook, an Apple Silicon MacBook, then start at a computer and see if you can get by with those specs. If you do really need a little bit more RAM, more storage, just buy a little bit more, like 512, and save it. Then the M2 MacBook Air. Be careful with that. Don't spend too much money on that computer. Don't upgrade it very further, because then it comes the second best deal on the Apple Silicon lineup. The M1 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro, the base model one that starts at $2,000. That's also an amazing deal, an insane performer, and with amazing specs and features for the price. Then, of course, if you are a prosumer, you do really need a very powerful computer. Take a listen. If you don't really need the M1 Max chip, I only advise you going for the M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro, because you will need the extra screen real estate, you will need the extra thermal performance, you will need the extra GPU power, the extra CPU power that this computer can guarantee you, and the extra battery life when working hard. But finally, if you do want a very cool and big laptop, go for the base model of the 16-inch MacBook Pro. In my opinion, for the MacBook Pro lineup, it's one of the best deals there. The base model 14-inch and the base model 16-inch are the best deals in terms of the Pro lineup. If you want my advice, and the last one, do not buy the M1 MacBook Pro nor the M2 MacBook Pro. Those two are not very good deals. They're not very much different from the M1 MacBook Air and the M2 MacBook Air. They are more expensive, they have the old design, and they lose some features like new battery life and, of course, the new bezel treatment that this 16-inch MacBook Pro has and the 14-inch MacBook Pro has, and, of course, the M2 MacBook Air also had. So, be very careful, spend your money carefully, and of course, if you can, go for the base model computers. Although the base model options of the M1 Pro MacBook Pro 14-inch and the M1 Pro MacBook Pro 16-inch and the M1 Max MacBook Pro 16-inch are the better option, just because they give you 512 GB of storage and they give you 16 GB of RAM, future-proofing your device. Of course, if you do really spend tons of money, then do not skip the M1 Max 16-inch with a 32 GB of RAM and 1 TB of storage, 2 TB of storage. These are amazing computers. If you are ready to spend that amount of money, then you won't be disappointed with this powerful machine. This is a beast. This is the most powerful laptop I've ever used, and I probably cannot hit the performance ceiling of this computer for like 10 years down the road. So I'm very happy with my MacBook Pro, and I can tell there's no better moment to buy a MacBook Pro than right now. Of course, they are updating the lineup every single year, so do not wait if you don't really need a computer now. Of course, if you want to play that game of, I need to wait for the next generation of chips, I need to wait for the M2 Pro, the M2 Max, don't. This computer are powerful enough. I mean, do whatever you do with your money. But right now, I do think there's an amazing chance for you to buy a MacBook Pro. Like, it's a cool day to buy a MacBook Pro and to shop for a MacBook Pro. So, if you enjoyed these types of videos of me trying to help your decisions, let me know in the comments down below. Also, while there, do not forget to tell me which is your favorite MacBook on the MacBook lineup. It's very important to me to get that feedback. And of course, while you're there, do not forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out reach 1,000 subscribers until the end of the year. This has been Tech Smart talking to you here. Bye.